really an honor to be here today, to be able to talk to you a little bit about Hope Center Indy. But to do that, my topic is sustainability, you do it. Sustainability, you do it. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to marry the miraculous provision of God and how God intervenes into our life and helps extend his kingdom. And then also that effort where we take our gifts and abilities and we begin to use those. And those abilities then begin to bring some provision to extend God's kingdom. And then to bring those two things together so that we can feel comfortable about them. So let's just jump in and talk about sustainability, you do it. And so one of my favorite stories is about a football player by the name of Hogan Horton. He played in the NFL years ago. He was an offensive lineman, and on one particular play, he was hit so hard they had to literally stop the game, brought the trainers out. The trainer knelt down beside him, and he said, Hogan, are you all right? And he said, I don't think so. He said, I think I'm going blind. And he said, what do you mean you think you're going blind? He said, all I can see is just this little circle with a little light coming through it. And the trainer said, Hogan, you're not going blind. He said, you've been hit so hard that your helmet's on sideways and you're looking out the ear hole. Well, sometimes, if we could take that illustration off the athletic field and put it into real life, we get hit so hard by financial crisis. We get hit so hard by unexpected expenses, whether it's our nonprofit, our church plants, whether it's our businesses or our families, that it literally knocks us down. Emmitt Smith is the leading rusher in the history of the NFL. Three-time MVP, three-time world champion. One thing I noticed about his statistics was this. Even though he is the champion rusher in the history of all the NFL, his average per carry is 4.2 yards. Now what that means to me is this. Every 4.2 yards out of those 18,000 yards that he actually gained in his career, someone knocked him down every 4.2 yards. Now I don't know about you, but life can knock you down. I don't know how you get up when you get knocked down. But sometimes when I get knocked down, I'll try to roll up my sleeve and I'll try to work a little bit harder. Or I'll say to myself, man, I can't work any harder. I'm giving it all I've got. I've got to work smarter. And so I try to work a little bit harder and I try to work a little bit smarter and I try to get myself up. But through the years, I've learned that working a little bit harder and I could work a whole lot smarter, it always hasn't helped. And so I've come to the conclusion that when life knocks you down, you got to pray harder. And so when I think about praying harder, how does that fit into the concept of sustainability? You do it. How does praying harder actually enter into that? In pastoral ministry for 25 years, I realized that God answers prayer in three different ways. And I bet most of you probably could answer how God answers prayer. So we would say, well, God answers prayer, yes. In other words, you've prayed the right prayer. You've said, this is what I need you to do, God. And God says, you ask according to my word and according to my will, and therefore I'm going to do it. Or sometimes God says, no, wrong request. There's way too much of you in that, and you've asked with wrong motives, as James would say, and so I'm not going to answer that. So God says yes, God says no. Sometimes God says, wait. Good request. It's just that the timing's wrong and I need to work over here a little bit and I need to work in the life of this person a little bit. But you keep trusting, you keep praying, and as you do those things, then I will be able to answer your prayer. So God says yes, God says no, God says wait a while. So then after about 25 years of ministry, I added another couple ways in which God actually answers prayer. And so the next one is God answers prayer this way. God says often, maybe. There we go. I have a better idea. And so sometimes we pray and God says, man, that's a good idea. I love your idea. but I have a better idea. It's kind of like Isaiah, when Isaiah says this, as high as the heavens are from the earth, that's the difference between God's ways and man's ways. Now, I don't know about you. I'm not sure what the distance is between heaven and earth, but it's a pretty big gap between how God thinks and how I think. And so sometimes when you and I pray, God says, man, good idea. It's just that I have a greater plan. I have a greater idea. My plan is so much bigger, so much larger. It is so much more grander than anything you could ever imagine, think, or even thought possible. This is kind of what I'm going to do. And when we think about the Hope Center, it's one of those kind of moments. In other words, when God has an idea, He's going to take you into territory where you can't do it in your own strength. He's going to make sure that you can't somehow fund it yourself. He's going to make sure that you have to get down on your knees and depend upon Him. It is a point in your life when God says, I'm going to take you where if you don't allow me to do it, you will fail. It's kind of like get out of the boat. If you don't keep your eyes on me, you will sink. And so God takes you into that territory where you have to become completely dependent upon Him. It's all of a sudden you understanding this is so big, so great, that I cannot do it. And so sometimes God says, I got a better idea. And so this is what I'm going to do, and you're going to be part of that. And then the last way in which God answers prayer is God says, you do it. Hey, Nehemiah, you go build that wall. It's time for you to do something. You know, all the gifts, all the talents, and all the abilities that you have, I put my spirit in you. You've got this power, my strength. It's all there for you. It's time for you to do it. And so there's this lady that's kind of partnered with us at the Hope Center, Dr. Carolyn Knight. And so Dr. Carolyn was driving by a billboard one day, and there in Indianapolis, it was a big billboard, and it was advertising a strip club. And so she just said this to the Lord. She said, Lord, please, would you help those women? And she heard Him say, you help them. And she thought, okay, I will. And so today she has 30 women's groups in 6 different states that goes to strip clubs to build relationships with ladies, just to let them know that there's help and there's hope. If you would like to come out, there is a way out for you. Sometimes God says to us, you do it. It's time for you to stand up, get in the game. It's time for you to get off the sidelines. It is time for you to step up, stand up, and do something. I have given you all that you need. You do it. Did you know it's a dangerous thing to pray, isn't it? Because when you pray and God says you do it, that means you're in the work. It's time for you. So when we think about that concept, you do it, how does that actually enter in to God's economy 101? In other words, how does that actually enter into God's economy 101 and God's sustainability? Well, when I think about that, one of the things I realized is this. I was taught, and I think rightfully so, that God is the creator of heaven and earth, and that God owns absolutely everything. Everything is His. Matter of fact, Psalm 50 says, all the cattle on the 1,000 hills, that's God. All the silver, all the gold, that's all God. I mean, He's the creator of all things. All things are God's. And so, how does that work out then in this whole process? Well, I just remember several weeks ago, I was standing in our coffee shop at the Hope Center, and this lady introduced me. She said, this is Pastor Hubert, and he owns the Hope Center. And I thought, oh no, don't even want to go there. I'm pretty sure Jesus owns this thing. I'm pretty sure that this ministry is the Lord, the Hope Centers. And so I just want you to understand that in our businesses, there needs to be a moment where we deed over our business to the Lord because He owns it anyway. There's a point in our life where if we are a church planter, we have to die to ourselves. And that church plant is the Lord's. And He will make it grow or it will not grow. We have to come to a point in our nonprofits where it is not about us. It is all about Him. And when it is about Him and He is the owner of all of it, then all of a sudden some amazing things begin to happen. So we transfer that deed to Him and the ownership that He has. Well, when that happens, the beautiful thing is these miraculous provisions of God, because He is the owner of it, then we can tap into those resources. There is nothing I love more than to see the miraculous hand of God doing provisions for His work. I love that. I remember coming into the center this last year. I was walking in the hallway. I met our treasurer. She said to me, "Hey, Pastor, salaries are due tomorrow." She didn't need to say anything else. I knew what she was saying. We're short. It's got to be in the bank today so it can come out of the account tomorrow. So what are you going to do about that, Pastor? And so I just said, okay. And so I had an appointment. So I was driving to my appointment, and I was having a conversation with the Lord. And I said this, "Hey, Lord, your salaries are due tomorrow. They're not my salaries. It's not my ministry. This is your ministry. This is your business. This is your nonprofit. This is your church, whatever it may be. Your salaries are due tomorrow. What are you going to do about that?" And so all the way down to Shelbyville, on the way home from my appointment, on the way home, I have to admit, I started to play God a little bit. You ever do that? I was playing God with a little g, though. Just want you to know, because I'm not very good at being God. God is good at being God. I need to let him be God, right? So I'm playing God. I'm trying to think about this. What can I give to make up for the payroll? I'm going to have to talk to my wife about how can we kind of supplement this and put in the money to make payroll tomorrow. And I'm thinking, or who can I call? Who can I call and make sure I can make payroll tomorrow? And so I get back to the center, and I'm walking in the hallway, and a lady meets me, and she said, "Hey, Pastor, this gentleman had just called me, wanted to make sure that he had put his check in the envelope. I just opened it. I called him. He did. Here's the envelope." So I go into my office. I said, I open up the envelope and pull out a check, and it's a check for $10,000. And so I'm thinking to myself, on my way to my appointment, when I was saying, "Hey, Lord, what are you going to do about your salaries tomorrow? They're due." He was probably saying, "Have you checked your mail today? It's already there," right? And so that was on a Wednesday, on a Tuesday, on a Friday, I came back into my office, went into my mailbox, and inside my mailbox was another envelope. I took it out, went into my office, sat down, opened it up, and inside that envelope was a check for $10,000. I'm beginning to think, there is a way in which you and I can really work it hard at doing what we're doing. We can think we can be really a lot smarter, and we can do all these, or we can somehow tap the miraculous provision of God, because God owns all the cattle on 1,000 hills. And sometimes we need to say to God, "God, you got to sell some cattle today. You got to sell the cattle and send me a check. Because if you don't, there's no way this is ever going to happen, because it is way too much for me." And so sometimes through those provisions, we see God's mighty hand. And so just over the last 2 years, it wasn't just one or two $10,000. Over the last 2.5 years, we've received 50 of those. I'm talking about miraculous divine favor. When God intervenes, when God says, "I hear who you are, I see what you do, and I care about it." And sometimes I say this, you know why God so cares? Because he sees these ladies. And when he sees them, his heart for them, to restore them, to renew them, to give them hope again. The heart of God is poured out when we are tapping in, and he is the owner of what we're doing. Now, the beautiful thing when it comes to sustainability, and when God says, "Hey, you do it." When we think about you do it, he says, "Hey, Nehemiah, go build that wall." Boy, he could build a wall. Sometimes God says to Moses, "Hey Moses, what do you got in that hand of yours?" And Moses says, "A staff." Well, that staff becomes a staff of miracles, right? And so we begin to understand that God is real, God is alive, and God is able, even in our day, to do this miraculous stuff if we would just trust him. And so when I think about that sustainability, you do it, I just want to say this. Just remember something. Jesus didn't ever ask us to do it in our own strength or by ourselves. He always says, "I will be with you. I don't care where you are to the ends of the earth. I'm going to be with you." We get to be co-laborers with God. Do you hear that? You and I we get a tag team with God in such a way that God is able to use our life to further the kingdom of God, to rescue the perishing, to make the eternal difference in the lives of people. And so God never intended for us to do it alone. It's kind of like a three-legged race, right? So if you've ever been in one of those three-legged races, they tie your left leg to a right leg of someone else, and they tie you together, and in unison you begin to try to run this race together. Well, Jesus said it was kind of this way. You see, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And if you take my yoke upon you, if you would become like a pair of oxen, let me put my mantle on you. You and I will go at this together, and we will be able to accomplish this. Jesus never said, "You do it," and then just leave you to yourself. He always wants to step into your business, your nonprofit, your churches. He wants to step into your life, your family. He wants to make sure that you understand something about him. He is able to redeem, restore, renew, and change, and transform, and help all of us to see that he is the great provider in all this. And so what I'm trying to say is this: I love it when God shows up. I love it when I see these miraculous provisions that only God could do, because there's no other way that you could ever explain that. I have a whole prayer journal of these incredible miracles of God that only can be explained by him and what he has done. But I also love the moment when God says, hey, you do it. Man, just get in there and roll up your sleeves and get dirty for the kingdom of God. Go ahead and get out there and love the unlovable and the unlovely and the broken and the hurting. And when you do that, you're like me. And just remember something. Even though I say to you, you do it, I will never leave you to do it by yourself. Well, that's the beautiful thing about the Hope Center. Man, when we took over the Hope Center, God was saying, hey, you do it. And so we took over this incredible campus, 26 acres, 210,000 square feet. And so when we took over this campus, we were thinking, what in the world have we done? What have we gotten ourselves into? And how in the world is this actually going to work? And how will we create this ministry? And so we were kind of like Moses a little bit. What's in your hand? We had to say, hey, look around and let's see what we have and what we can do. And so when we did that, we realized that we had this large entry. And so when we had this open lobby area, we had a couple ladies who came to me and they said, hey, Pastor, let us create a boutique for you. A boutique, it could be an ongoing fundraiser for you every day to help provide for the center. Now, the funny thing was this: I had never been to a boutique, never heard of a boutique, could hardly say the word boutique. And they said, oh, no, Pastor, really, it could be a good thing. And so these two ladies created this. And over the last 2.5 years, I don't even know for sure how many thousands of dollars they have donated back to the Hope Center. But what they did was they took their ability and their eye for fashion and design and retail and postage and handling and all those kind of things, and they created this incredible shop. They do a fashion show in the fall and the one in the spring. They just did their fall fashion show, donated back to the Hope Center $30,000 back to the Hope Center just from their fall fashion show. And I would just say this to you: those ladies couldn't have written me a check out of their own personal account, but because of their gifts, and they were willing to use it for sustainability for the Hope Center, they were able to create businesses that helps us now, even today. Well, we also then had a couple other rooms that we created a coffee shop, and these ladies helped design that. I need to know how to make money on coffee. Other coffee shops do it really well. This is a little bit more difficult for us, but it also serves the public as they are coming into shop. So it's going to, one thing adds to another. We also then had a barn, and it was a woodworking barn. And so on tours, people were saying to me, that needs to be a wedding chapel. And I said, what a great idea. You think we came up with all these ideas? No, it was people who actually came through talking to us about what we could actually do. And so we had this big barn. It holds about 220 people, built in 1898. It's absolutely beautiful. You can see some of the pictures there. This year we've got 48 events scheduled at the wedding barn. Next year we have 37 Saturdays already scheduled. That means there's only 15 Saturdays left for the year 2020. Can you imagine? And so the wedding barn's becoming an incredible fundraiser for us. We have a greenhouse, and so we have these 5 greenhouses, and the roof had blown off, hadn't been used for like 20 years, and so we thought, well, let's put this back together. There was a gentleman who has his degree from Purdue here in horticulture, and so we thought, hey, we can put that back together. We raised some of our own produce for the kitchen for the ladies so we can eat in the cafeteria. So we have tomatoes and cucumbers and green beans and potatoes and peppers and you name it, we're growing it. We're growing flowers. We sell things we don't raise, like sweet corn, melons, and all that kind of stuff, because we actually can. And people come to buy from the greenhouse. So it's another thing. We have additional rooms in the lobby. So this room here is going to be a beauty salon. We realize that part of the needs for our ladies are to get their hair done, and so we won't have to transport them off campus to do that. They can come downstairs, get their hair done. We'll have professional beauticians in there that will also be able to serve the public, and they'll be able to shop in the boutique, go to the coffee shop as well, be part of that. And then we have another barn that we're going to turn into a pet hotel. So this animal barn is actually something where people can drop their dogs off, go on vacation. It could be a doggy daycare. We'll do therapy. We do dog grooming. We'll have a doggy boutique because that people like to spend money on their pets as well. So we're doing everything we can for sustainability. Our goal is that these businesses would be about half of our budget, creating revenue and income, and the other half will just trust God and just see the mighty provision of God as he continues to work and serve at the center. So when it comes to the Hope Center, we're about sustainability and being there next year and the following year and the following year and the following year. And we're about transformation and transforming these ladies' lives. So, hey, thank you for letting me share today.